I feel incredibly motivated by what I've heard so far today, and I know you must feel the same. I loved that speech from the First Lady. It's wonderful to hear her speak so forcefully about an issue of such incredible importance. I loved it when she said, girls are counting on us to be bold and creative. I mean, that is such a great call to arms, and I know certainly at Glamour Magazine we will take that to heart. Last month, when Glamour honored as Women of the Year 10 young women fighting for their education, Mrs. Obama acknowledged them and wrote them the most impassioned letter that I know they all took home with them to their homes around the world, and that I know will sustain them as they do what all of you know to be this very difficult work. This issue really needs champions, and it's a privilege to have been in the presence of such a dedicated one, Mrs. Obama. In case you're wondering what Glamour Magazine is doing here on this panel, I will tell you we have an audience of 19 million women, most of them in this country, and we always try to cheer them on and show them ways that they can achieve their dreams. And lately we've been covering the issue of girls' education as it has risen to international importance and as our readers have started to pay attention to it. We've interviewed Malala and even traveled with her. My colleague Genevieve Roth, who is here today, traveled with her to Nigeria as she was advocating, as Malala was advocating on behalf of the kidnapped schoolgirls there last year. And we've covered what Rebecca talked about earlier, the fact that there are 15 countries at least in which girls are systematically attacked for going to school. And we found that our readers are incredibly interested, and they come back to us with one question, which is, how can I help? So last month, along with our partners at CARE, Plan International USA, Girls Inc., and Communities in Schools, Glamour launched something called the Girl Project, which is a multi-year initiative to send girls all over the world to school. We know that girls who want an education won't let threats of violence or community disregard or poverty or global indifference stand in their way, and we want to help them get what they want. The Girl Project is focused on secondary education and also supports the kind of so-called second-generation issues that we've been discussing today. Issues like safety for students and quality in education, and helping girls not just enter school, but graduate and then go farther. So you've heard about these issues, I know, throughout this conference, and we're delighted to have with us on this panel both activists focused on community-based solutions and two young women who have lived these issues personally. So please welcome, here on the end, Namanyana Mwajuma is a 17-year-old student in Uganda and the youngest of 8 siblings. After her father disappeared mysteriously in June 2013, her family was no longer able to afford school fees, and Namanyana was forced to drop out. The organization CARE was able to assist with programs and support that enabled Namanyana to go back to school and to change her life, and she'll tell us more about that later. We're pleased to have her here on her first visit to the United States and as the first student ambassador for the Girl Project. Welcome. Next, Madalo. Madalo Samati has 20 years of experience with government and grassroots organizations, as well as advocacy, action research, and project monitoring in Malawi, where she is the director of programs for the Creative Center for Community Mobilization. And this NGO is part of the Charge Network and was recognized as the most innovative in girls' education programming in 2013 by its country's government. So nicely done, Madalo. Charlene Espinosa, to my left, is co-founder of the NGO Bosh Bosh, which trains African women to make handbags. As the editor of Glamour Magazine, I can vouch that they are fantastic. It also offers a range of programs in after-school education, vocational training, and more. Charlene grew up in California, but moved to Mexico at age 10 with her family. After college, she worked as a commercial designer, but then joined the Peace Corps and was deployed to Liberia. Her experience there, trying to improve the dropout rate for Liberian girls, showed her what was working and what wasn't. We'll hear about that later. It helped lead to the creation of Bosh Bosh. Welcome, Charlene. Our final panelist, you have already met, is your host today, Dr. Rebecca Winthrop, a senior fellow and director of the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. Rebecca, as you know, is an international expert on global education and a source that we all are indebted to. Before joining the Brookings in 2009, she spent 15 years working in the field of education for displaced and migrant communities, most recently as the head of education for the International Rescue Committee. She serves on the World Economic Forum's New Vision for Education Project Steering Committee, the UN Secretary General's Technical Advisory Committee for his Global Education Initiative, and is track advisor for the Education and Workforce Development track at the Clinton Global Initiative. Most important, if you want to stay up to date on what's going on in the field of global education, I highly recommend you follow her on Twitter. So,
I didn't ask her to say that.
So let's get started. We'll have time for Q&A at the end of the panel, and for those of you who are watching on the webcast, please join our conversation by submitting questions on Twitter using the hashtag #GirlsEDU. Namanyana, let's start with you because you are living these issues. Can you tell us a little bit about what your life is like now?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Namanyana Mwajima. I come from Uganda in Africa. I'm 17 years old. I have 3 brothers and 4 sisters. I'm the last born. I go to Kasoro Hillside College, Baraod, Kamuli district in Uganda. My father disappeared last year. When he disappeared, we as a family suffered. I personally, I dropped out of school. But my mother did not give up on me. She looked for ways to see that I got back to school through cultivation and selling her products. Later, she joined a saving group. When I went back to school, I became happy and excited. I gained the confidence, knowledge, life skills, and I stay focused. That has made me who I am today. Thank you for listening.
Namanyana, you were telling us earlier what you would like to do once you complete your education.
Sorry?
What you would like to do after you finish secondary school, once you finish school.
I want to be a nurse when I complete my studies.
And what will it take for you to finish school, to complete your studies?
Sorry?
What do you need to complete your studies?
Money.
A one-word answer that says it all. Madalo, let's hear from you. When you were in school, what was your education like, and how did you obtain your education?
I'm from Malawi, and I did my primary school in the 80s and secondary school in the early 90s. Life in an African country is not easy for a girl because, number one, there's a lot of harmful gender scripting because all we are told is that you are weak, and they groom us to become good mothers, good wives, and good caretakers for our homes. And I remember many, many instances as a young girl growing up. My mother is a nurse. On average, I was better placed than a rural girl, though my mother worked in rural areas. But it was very clear to me that as a girl, I must be a very good woman in terms of being a good wife, good mother in the future, and a good caretaker. And I remember one day telling her that, you know what? She was telling me to do some household chores. And I said no, because I wanted to do something else. Then she tells me that, you know what? You're going to have problems in your household in the future because you are lazy and you don't want to work. But I told her that, you know what? I'm going to be educated and I'm going to have housemates in my house to work for me. I was naturally a defiant child, but that helped me a big time because my elder sisters and my cousins, there are 8 of us in our family. They underwent our tribal initiation ceremony that graduates us into adulthood. And the 2 years after that, they all got pregnant. And when it was my turn to go there, I told my mom that I'm not going. And because of so many reasons, naturally, that's how I was. But 2 years later, my mother, I think it dawned on her that there's something wrong with our cultural institution. And all of them dropped out of school, and I was the only one that went through with my education and was selected to go to the university. So gender scripting is a big issue. We live that life in Africa, and we cannot deny that. I've gone through that, and I know what I'm talking about. Going to school, there was a lot of gender-based violence in our schools. And being a girl and a hard worker, if I do well in class, I faced a lot of harassment from the boys. And this is what most girls are going through right now. When I went into college, I was privileged to be an action researcher for one of our major girls' education programs that was funded by USAID. So I went into different parts of Malawi, and it was so shocking to see the same experiences and the plight of the girls in different parts of the country and different tribes. But one thing that I saw in myself, which I saw that so many girls did not have, was the power that was within me, the intrinsic motivation to pursue education and to get out of the plight that I saw, the intimidation that I saw around me, coming from my household, done, of course, in good favor to them, and coming from the community, through our cultural institutions, and coming from the school. And I remember even at one point, a teacher prepositioned me. I was really scared, but I was able to stand up as a young girl to say no. So all this is what girls in an African setup go through. But it really we have to do a lot of build self-efficacy in our girls to be able to stand up and defy some of the harmful social cultural practices that are out there. Yeah.
Thank you. Charlene, I know these two stories are probably somewhat familiar to you, and I know you saw some similar things when you worked in Liberia with the Peace Corps. So tell us a little bit about what your experiences there were like and what you did about them.
So yes, thank you, Cindy. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. This is really an honor to be a part of this wonderful panel. I'm really excited, and you know, it's an honor to also share my experience as a returned Peace Corps volunteer with all of you, and to represent my organization back in Liberia. I know that they can't watch it right now, but they are gonna watch it at some point. So they're all like super excited that I'm here representing them. So thank you very much for having me. And you know, listening to their stories, it really, God, it just hits home. You know, it reminds me of when I was in Liberia as a Peace Corps volunteer, which wasn't that long ago. I just recently got back this August. And I lived there for 3 years, and as a Peace Corps volunteer, that really gave me insight as to what challenges, what the challenges were for Liberian females on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, I was a teacher there. So I taught English at the secondary public school in my community. And I remember every time I would arrive to school, I would witness morning devotion, which consisted of, I'm not sure if you girls had morning devotion. Yes, okay. It consisted of saluting the flag and, you know, singing the national anthem. And you could see all the students in front of you line up in different rows. We had the younger generation, all the preschoolers and kindergartens to your right, and then we had all the high schoolers to your left. So right there in front of me, you know, as a teacher, I could see the problem literally right there. And you had around 200 students in preschool, and they're all 50%, you know, 50% were girls, 50% were boys. And then once you climbed, you know, to the high school, there was 20 students. And out of those 20 students, 4 were girls. And, you know, that's really when it hit me, when I saw that. I was in awe. I was like, well, this can't be what's going on. Like, we need to address this. as a female, like this really hit home. So this was the issue that we really wanted to address and really want to focus on. My counterpart, who is Sisiama, she's a third-grade teacher at the school where I taught at, came to me and she said that, you know what, Charlene, we need to do something about this. Let's try to encourage girls to go to school and to keep them in school. So what we did is we did after-school girls club, and it was a lot of fun. We had like 40 girls attend, and what we really wanted to focus on was just giving them the support and the guidance so they can graduate high school, because that was our main goal. But soon I quickly realized that, just like Namuyana said, they needed money. You need money to go to school. We can't just, be like, yes, let's have a girls' club and we're going to support you. They need, to pay their school fees. They need to pay their uniforms, their copybooks, and they don't have money to do this. So it wasn't until I went to neighboring country Sierra Leone where I came across this really beautiful bag, and it hit me right there that this is something that we can teach our girls. This is a trade that would be, self-sustaining and they can live off. And also, this could be a great way to inspire them and encourage them so they can keep going to school. And eventually find a way that we can provide scholarships for them. So that's really how it began, with that idea. I purchased the bag, I brought it back to Liberia with me, and I showed my counterpart, Sisiama. She loved the idea. We talked to our local tailor. He agreed to help us, teach our girls how to make bags. And initially, we didn't have any funding to purchase bags. Again, money issues. So what I went ahead and told the tailor was to bring all his leftover pieces of scraps of fabric. From then, we started making bags in a patchwork design, like a quilted design, and that's called Bosh Bosh upcountry. That's why our organization is called Bosh Bosh. So through Bosh Bosh and through the revenue that we were getting from our bags, because we started selling them to Peace Corps volunteers, who were our first clientele. They're like, yes, bags, let's take these as gifts, and it was great. So Peace Corps was definitely a huge supporter. And from then, all the NGOs, all the expats came to us and started purchasing our bags. And we started a small business out of nowhere, really. And through the revenue, we were able to provide scholarships for all our girls. And right now, Bosh Bosh, our main focus is to provide vocational training to all of them, to provide them access to extracurricular educational opportunities, such as tutoring and advising. We really focus on their literacy. We give them computer training, so they all have a Facebook account now, pretty much. And we also have check-ins, which is a very important component of our program. Our education staff goes around twice a month, and they go to each of our scholars, which is our students, families, and they go and they check up on them. They check to see if what's going on at home, like how are they responding. We give them a report on what they're doing with their computer classes and how they're evolving. And we also check in with their professors to make sure that they're doing well in their lessons. So Bosh Bosh has been very successful and has really created all our, has really created a volunteerism spirit in all our girls too, because we have this very special program that's called the STAR program, which I wish I had a star with me, but what they do is they make these beautiful color stars made out of the fabrics that are left over from our bags, and they use cardboard diamond shapes pieces, and they just sew it all together with pieces of rice bag, and they make these beautiful, different sizes stars. And what's so special about these stars is that all the funds are used for community service projects. So 50% of that, of the revenue that comes in goes into Bosh Bosh, and 60% goes to a community service project that they implement themselves. So like, for example, our girls went to their maternity health clinic, and they went and purchased trash cans, and they installed it all over their clinic, and they cleaned around the area, and they also raised enough funds so they can purchase paints and paint their entire school. So, I mean, that was such a huge thing for them.
And they're running it.
And they're running it, yeah. That was their ideas, to go to the community health clinic and do this. It was their idea to, you know, paint the school. And it's just
these great examples of things that community activation can accomplish. You know, helped Na Mañana. Medallo is currently working with community organizations, helping tons of young women. You know, you had your experience. It sounds like such common sense, right? Of course, community activation should be part of this. We can't get anywhere with girls' education without it. So how is that not business as usual? You know, help us understand. Mrs. Obama talked about some of the reasons that donors are sometimes hesitant to fund community-based organizations. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, I mean, first off, a couple of points. I think all the examples here up on stage, if you went to probably everyone in the audience, they could give you 10 more as well. There's lots of amazing work being done at the community level. And I've traveled quite a bit and worked on this topic for 20 years and been in some very difficult circumstances. So even in Afghanistan or South Sudan or a whole range of places, I never was in an area where it might not have been in every community, where I didn't find some advocates for girls' education. It could have been a father, it could be a woman, it could be students themselves. So I think that there's incredible interest, no matter how difficult the context, for girls themselves, parents, communities for this. And I think in many ways it is business as usual, as much as people who are incredibly busy, have to work very hard just to put food on the table, don't have a lot of great supply often in terms of education services. Communities all over the world are really trying to figure out how to support girls in different ways and shapes. But I do find that once you start moving up the food chain, whether it's at a national ministry level or a state government in a developing country, and then perhaps up at the global level where you have lots of big external resources going to girls' education, big, important programs. And I want to make it clear that I think policy is incredibly important, and getting the sort of national policy environment is incredibly important. So it's not that it's not important, but there seems to be a breakdown between the types of interventions and connections and activities that are happening at the community level with the funding streams and the policy priorities. Not always a breakdown, but that little chain between the two is often very limited and can be very weak. And from a global perspective, if you asked about funding and donors, you know, if I had my dream, we would have one big fund somewhere that doesn't replace the fund that's at the Global Partnership for Education, which focuses on building systems, education systems, but a big fund sitting somewhere, somebody, one of you could do it, I'm looking at the various people in the room who I'm thinking about for this. But anyways, I won't name them. I'm constraining myself. That basically could be used to fund community groups to try to scale up their work. It's very hard. We have this incredible program that Medallo is part of, Urvashi is part of, and many in the room are part of, called the Echidna Scholars Program, which basically asks for people to apply who are community leaders and have scaled their work somewhat around the world in girls' education. They've tested their model. They have a good work model they can scale. And you know, one of the hardest things they say is it's, you know, you can get a little ways, but it's hard to go bigger. So how do we help, you know, do community activation that just isn't one community at a time? Do it at a bigger scale and have a bigger impact. And I've noticed that there's some funding sources from sort of the global arena that focus on very small scale inputs, which is good to get someone, you know, a certain step of the way. And then there's other funding sources which are really for big projects, should go to the government for national scale programs, and there's like nothing in the middle for people, community leaders who want to start scaling their work. Maybe you want to take Bosch to other places. Madalu is, I don't know how long you've worked. Now the government has finally picked it up, but that was a long, hard process. So I would love to have a fund out there to sort of support what seems promising but isn't 100% proven. And donors can be a little bit risky to have some pieces fail, and that is very difficult.
I loved it. I loved it when Mrs. Obama earlier said, failure is necessary. Failure is good, and I thought that must be a very difficult message to take out to a donor.
Yeah, in fairness to the donors in the room and who aren't in the room, people making decisions about funding. For girls' education, particularly large donors, it's usually not the person who's making the grant whose money it is. In cases of governments, it's taxpayers' money. It's incredibly hard for governments to be super risky because they're going to look bad in the taxpayers' eyes. I mean, if we could socialize anything, if you could help socialize anything, Cindy, in the U.S., is that folks should try to take risks, and it's okay. And if we aren't seeing some things that don't work, then we're not really trying innovative stuff. I mean, if we could change that culture in both the American culture and other constituencies where there's big donor bases, that would be huge.
Got it. Risk. We're talking a lot here today about how girls themselves change when they can obtain an education, and Namanyana, you talked so vividly about what this has meant in your own life. I also want to hear a bit about how the communities themselves change when girls are educated. Madalo, can you talk a bit about that? How does a community change once we start seeing more girls obtain a secondary school education, actually graduate, and then go on? What happens in a town?
Well, I don't know if I understood your question very well, but I'll try to answer it and you let me know. I think, first of all, I'll talk from both ends. For us to change the systemic issues, and in this case, I'll talk about the cultural institutions. Like in my country, we value our culture, and we have institutions that are custodians of our values and practices. There is need to actively engage them. And together, enable them to go through a process of identifying the issues in their culture that is positive and that is negative. Let them come up with solutions to those problems and do action planning on and on. And this is practical and possible when it comes from themselves. So what we have done as an organization is to train village change agents. In each and every, our vision is that Malawi should have a village change agent in every village in the country. That will facilitate dialogue amongst members in that village, come together and look at their issues and how they can promote development in their own society. We have worked previously where we had government extension workers, or we as officers coming from somewhere externally to work with the people. We realized that we cannot do it because the people are the ones that can change themselves. They can cheat us when we get there, oh, we have changed this and that. But when you get away, they do business as usual. But when it's they themselves, they have changed it, and they have formed bylaws on the change, they are able to monitor their own work. And we have seen this to be very powerful. And because of that, some of the harmful practices that nobody could change, because to them they said this was what our forefathers were doing, and nobody can change this. But because they are going through this process themselves and making the changes themselves and monitoring themselves, a lot of harmful practices have been eliminated in the areas we're working with.
Can you give an example of one of those?
Well, an example would be we have what we call hyenas. in our local language, we call fisi. Fisi is a translation of hyena. So hyenas come at night in our villages. And in this case, the hyena is a person, a man, that comes at night when girls are supposed to graduate into adulthood so that they can break their virginity as a sign of entry into adulthood. You know, these are the issues that on the surface you cannot know them. And most often when we sit in the ministry headquarters and talk about these issues, most people say we are not true, it's not happening. But this is right happening in our doorstep and in this century. And these are the issues that we are dealing with, and we are breaking that silence. People should come out and talk about it, because that's also a process. Because it's a secret society. So this is a job that men would have in a particular village or society to do, to graduate girls into adulthood. But it is this process that enables the people to start to talk about it in the context of HIV/AIDS, because that's the training we give to the village agents. Look at the context we are in right now. There's HIV/AIDS. There are rights of these girls to go to school, for rights for sexual and reproductive health rights, and so on and so forth. How can we help our girls so that we can improve our societies? So it's because of this and that kind of dialogue, honest dialogue amongst themselves, that unravels such kind of secretive things that you wouldn't even know. But they are happening in our own society. But then, when now they have done this, girls are going back to school. And they are seeing the importance of educating girls. And I mean, we all know, as a society, we are a communal society. We live in extended families. And what we have seen is that there's so much dependent on the girl child. So when you ask, research has shown, when we ask an adult, a father or a mother, what's your vision for your future? Who will take care of you? They always talk of the girl child. And yet they don't want to invest in that girl child in terms of education. But they have seen that when they educate the girl child, the benefits of education, they're extended to the whole extended family and clan. So that is also another inspiring thing that we share with the communities, examples of what it means to educate a girl child and the benefits that come to the society when you educate a girl child. Sure.
Wonderful. Thank you. You just told the harrowing story about hyenas. Thinking about men and boys and what their role is in all this. Namanyana, we were talking about this before. What do you see the role of men being here and boys?
Men and boys are decision makers at home and school. So they should support us.
I know you had a friend recently who had to leave school or was told by her father to leave school. Yes?
I have a friend, but she left because she conceived, yet her father told her to go and marry. She didn't support her. Yeah.
Rebecca, you mentioned before that fathers can become advocates, and I think many people in this room have probably seen that. Can you talk about the power of that?
Yeah, it's actually a theme that we've been talking about for the last couple days here in this conference, which had some sessions before this one. It's incredibly powerful when brothers and fathers, uncles, whomever stand up for girls' education. And we were talking amongst ourselves because most of the communities, when we sit down and start talking about girls' education, I don't mean communities on the ground, I mean, sort of advocates, it's women who are advocates. Mm-hmm. We had a meeting here yesterday, which there was 3 men in the room, and it was about 100 people, and it was on girls' education. We thought, what is going on? and some of our colleagues saying, a colleague of mine, Mario Cheno Kenya was saying, what we really should focus on is he for she. He for she. How can men and boys stand up for the girls and women in their lives? And I'm not exactly sure that there's one way to do that. I think it will be very different depending on context, how you would bring those in. I would say that we probably need to be much more conscious about it in our program design. We probably need to be much more conscious about it in our funding. There's a great example of an organization, Kadam, who is here from Pakistan, in rural Pakistan, who got polio when he was a young child and was not able to go to school. And his friends, 6 friends, this is in very rural Pakistan, said, we'll take you to school in a wheelbarrow. And when they went to pick him up, they said, well, why is your sister not going to school? And then all of a sudden, in a village, you had 6 boys, I think they were 8, 9, 10, who started a little NGO in rural Pakistan, going from house to house, trying to convince the fathers to let the daughters go to school. And in fact, they did. And now he has this, really large NGO in rural Pakistan doing the exact same thing. So it was a lot easier for the boys who were mobile. Yeah. Grace education in Pakistan, but it was a lot easier for the boys to actually get out and argue rather than in that context for the girls. So anything we can do to try to instigate that type of engagement.
Right. Rebecca, you were saying before, and I know this has been a theme throughout the conference, that it's so important that we figure out how to take all these little innovations and scale them up so that, as you mentioned before, we're not just educating one girl or even just one community at a time. There's a room full of people here and more who are watching who have the power to help with that, thought leaders and politicians and donors. What should they know about what they can do to help make this issue big? I mean, I'd love to hear from any of you on this, but Rebecca, do you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure. I think that most of the people in this room care about girls' education, and then there's a lot of donors who care about girls' education. So it's not so much the subject, it's more the how. And I think it would, I hear a lot, we work with a lot of different groups from civil society and governments and the philanthropic community, and I hear a lot from particularly donors, different types of donors, philanthropists, foundations, government donors, that it's very hard to find the innovative ideas. And it's very hard to know who is doing the good work on the ground. Where are the Grace, Grace education in Pakistan or the CRACOM in Malawi, et cetera. And I think what I would urge people is to, do a better job of reaching out to your networks and finding those folks, because they are there. Just because you do not know about them does not mean they're not there. I carry around a little list with me now of, 15 great organizations that are sort of, has scaled a bit, could be great sort of partners, and give it to anyone who wants to know. And these are groups that, we've sort of done due diligence on. So that would be one thing. Absolutely, do some more homework. And then the second thing would be try new mechanisms for funding. A lot of times the way funding proposals and requirements are made, most groups can't even apply. Even translate your grant requests. Just that is going to get you a different group of people coming in.
Madala, you look like you have something to add there.
Yes, I would talk programmatically.
Yeah.
That I think it's also important. There's so much stress sometimes on other things, the processes, instead of going out and looking at the systemic issues at the grassroots level and see how we can engage the grassroots and ensure that they have ownership to the issues. I think that's what I would really emphasize, that we need to get to the grassroots. All our energy must get to the grassroots. Then change, it's going to be quick. Yeah.
I love that. Great optimism. Charlene, is there something that people here should...
just to add on to what Madala said, you really need to support grassroots organizations because they're really the ones who know their community, very well. And I mean, you know, as a former Peace Corps volunteer, I would say, you know, reach out to Peace Corps as well. We're really the ones out on the field. We're at the field. We know exactly what's happening. We know, you know, community leaders. We work with counterparts. We're there on a daily basis. So, I mean, if you ask perhaps, you know, any of the volunteers that if they know of any other organizations in their community or around, I mean, that would be a great way to also reach out.
I have another question that I want to ask you, which is that we hear that being an activist on this issue of girls' education can be really lonely, and so many people are working with so many different, you know, medium and small-sized organizations all over the world. How do we create a network that is helpful and sustaining and keeps people going on? It gives them that sense of camaraderie.
So just an example. For my counterpart, Sisiama, she was a third grade teacher at the school where I taught. And as soon as I arrived as a Peace Corps volunteer, she came up to me and she asked me, you know, I'm really interested in starting a girls club. I really want to empower our young leaders here. Can you help me? So, you know, from that collaboration, this idea came about. And through her guidance, I was able to really learn more about my community and what my community needs were. And through her, through Sisiama, I met with other, you know, organizations in my community that needed support as well. So, you know, as a Peace Corps volunteer, I was there, like I said, every day, and I was immersed in my community, and I knew what their needs were. So,
Madala, how do you keep yourself going when your work is difficult? I know it must be frequently.
I call development work to be more of a calling than a job, because you have to have a heart for the work you're doing. And this is, I think, an area that possibly in development we don't look at it critically, because for change, transformation to take place, especially in development and in the work we do, there's a lot of sacrifice that we have to make as practitioners, development practitioners. And you can only sacrifice when you have the heart for it. And that's why even the powerful grassroots organizations, those that are powerful, it's because they are intrinsically motivated with a social cause. And that's how you get commitment. And in my organization, we ensure that as we are growing, because we started small, but as we are growing, when staff come in, we have to orient them to not just to come for a job, but to be motivated with a social cause. And the moment we do that, things go on very well. So to me, it's more of having the heart for the job that we do.
And helping other people have the heart as well.
And helping other people.
I want to pause our conversation for a moment to take questions from the room, if there are any. Yes, back there.
Hi, I'm Susan Davis. I lead BRAC USA, formerly the Bangladesh Rural Advancement Committee, for those who've never heard about it. And I really want to say I'm completely inspired by the wonderful panel and presentations today and earlier, and the phenomena that you're talking about of local leaders. I connect and name as part of this global social entrepreneurship movement that I've been witnessing since, I guess, I first met Bill Drayton sitting in Bangladesh and said, oh, you mean more people like Eunice and Abed, the founders of Grameen and BRAC, and now we see this incredible rise. So the idea, that the hypothesis that you're saying, let's fund and scale up local leaders, the change maker in every community, is I think part of the awakening that gave rise to microfinance and others, and certainly with girls' education, it seems now's our moment. So the question I have for all of you is, how do you define quality education in the 21st century? What are the ingredients for boys and girls that we need to to think about when we talk about education?
That's a great question. Rebecca, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I do. And I'll not launch onto a lecture.
Define quality education. Go.
I do, and I'm smiling because I'm looking at a number of colleagues in this room who, over the last 2.5 years, we've been working together to think about what are the competencies that young kids, girls and boys, need to have to be successful in their work and lives in this century. And through this initiative called the Learning Metrics Task Force, a number of us have literally sat around saying, what are the core competencies, and can that be an orienting framework for what we mean by quality? I think quality can mean many things. I think you can talk about having, a roof that doesn't leak so rain doesn't drop on people's head. It can mean having safe routes to and from school. It could be so big that you could include everything under it possibly. But one of the things that I like about this initiative and the colleagues, the many, many colleagues who've been involved in this, is that it focuses the mind on what I think Susan was asking, which was, what do we need kids to learn? And that initiative came up with, let's see, I'm going to be put to the test here, I think 7 big areas where they thought, an education in a country is really, should cover these core things. And some of them are quite obvious, literacy and communication. So you should be able to both, receive, synthesize, and communicate back out. There's a debate now, should digital literacy be part of that? I personally argue yes. You talk to people, and this is a group that has people in the conversation from 100 different countries, so there's a lot of debate. People in more regions where you don't have a lot of internet, so say, listen, let's not put the cart before the horse. But I do think you do need to have digital literacy, and in the next 10 years. If you don't have to have it today, you're going to have it in 10 years, and we might as well equip everybody with it. So literacy and communication, numeracy, so knowing how to use sort of math in everyday life, learning approaches and cognition, which is a very technical term, which means loving learning. Instill in children an ability to learn new things over their lives. Folks at Google call this learning agility. And they think it's like the #1 thing that makes for a successful employee. So we don't exactly know how to do that or even measure it, but it's incredibly important.
Especially if you want a job at Google, apparently.
Yes, but not just. So many kids kids who are in school today are going to have multiple different jobs, and they are and things they're going to have to face in our world, climate change and global insecurity, all these new issues, and they're going to have to be very agile in their ability to consume new information and learn new things across their lives. Social and emotional skills was another piece that was incredibly important, and we heard a lot about it on the previous panel. So perseverance and grit and determination and learning to work with other people. And then there was culture in the arts, which is incredibly important. And there's one more which I've forgotten, but I think physical health and well-being. Someone just shouted it out.
This definition of quality education is something that really is universal, presumably. You're saying that even though we've been talking so much about community differences, and,
exactly.
As one panelist said earlier, families in one community might want a particular kind of future for their children, and families in another community a totally different one. These things are universal.
Thank you, Cindy, for pointing that out. I didn't say that. This was an effort to say, it actually started with a very large consultation around the world. And the first question was, are there sort of things kids could learn or competencies they should have that every kid in the world should have, no matter where they live? And the answer was yes, and here's some of the core areas.
Got it. Another question, right here. There's a microphone if you'd like one.
Yes, I'm Mehnaz from Pakistan, and we live in a reality of paradoxes. We had the first Muslim Prime Minister, Benazir Bhutto, and then we have Malala, who got shot as she stood up for girls' education. And still, in Pakistan, 33% of only the girls are going to primary schools of all the students enrolled. While we are working at pockets of championship, pockets of women's leadership, and all, but we are not able to push through the agenda very, very strongly. Some natural champions that we have are our national, political leadership. And local political leadership. As we see that, we can continue to say what we have to say, but when the First Lady of the US comes into a room and says something very simple in terms of a commitment, it really, really makes a difference. So I would urge the group, and my question is that how would we fold the local political leadership, who are the bastions of legislature? They are extremely important for us, because for the past so many years we have been working with the local champions, and we do believe in that, harnessing that kind of energy. But unless it is put into a system of change, the state is responsible. Our respective states are responsible. And how are those voices going to be heard by the states to be able to make a change? And then to, influence the global change as well.
Is there anybody who wants to take it? I mean, I think one interesting thing you're bringing up is that we've been mostly talking about local NGOs, but the local political leadership is incredibly important too, as you point out. Madalo, is that something that you've seen in your work? Do you want to talk about the influence or lack of influence that the local political leaders have?
Yes, I think that's a very, very important area that we always must take into account as we are working at the grassroots. Getting the political leaders involved, the members of parliament in the districts, it's very, very critical, because they are the ones that do legislation, and if they are not aware of the issues or the neglect or deny, because mostly these issues, gender issues, are often, really not people, the policymakers don't want to tackle them.
They're not popular.
Yes, they are not popular, in other words, yes. Because they conflict with our male-dominated cultural society. So when we get them involved, get them to the ground, let them see the impact that is taking place, negative as well as positive, that changes them. And get them into the media to speak about the issues. It helps quite a lot. And even at ministerial level, it's also very important to have champions at that level that will talk about these issues aggressively, so that we can make a headway. In our case, for example, we just established an adolescent girls learning task force that has brought together the private sector, the donors, the civil society, including chiefs and the villagers, with the policymakers, the government. So we are in this together to provide leadership and a vision for girl-child programming and policy implementation in the country. So we are taking all these issues that some of them they were running away from. We're saying this is an issue. We must address it. And how do we do it? So we are confronting the issues head on, which in a natural sense, they would have just shied away. Yeah.
Charlene, you work in a country with a female head of state. Does that make any difference in terms of how people view the importance of girls' education?
Yes, definitely. I would say that Liberia is actually pretty progressive when it comes to girls' education. I mean, nonetheless, you still have, people, or mostly men, that aren't very supportive. But I would say that I was pretty impressed with Liberia, especially in my community. And we had, I think, around 10 female teachers in my school. So that really meant that's a pretty big deal. Versus other schools, they were all males. But in my community, everyone was very supportive towards, girl empowerment, and welcomed even our girls' club with open arms. So I think that has a lot to do with, Ma Ellen.
Mm-hmm. Ma Ellen.
Ma Ellen.
Yes. Would you like a microphone?
Thank you. What I have done is to work with the community and especially with men. I don't do anything without their consent. In each step, in Afghanistan, things were very different 40 years ago. I went to a private school, Catholic school. I could wear a skirt. I could ride a bike. But things have changed. And with the war and civil war and invasion and Taliban, and I think things have changed so much that we have to go from the root to really make them understand. I think these men that are older men, they did have education. If they didn't have much, but they had position. To work in a community, that's what I'm doing. Like, I'm really working with the mayor and the malik. And so each step that we work, and it's success. There are 7 villages, and they would have never allowed me to have a school. For a year, I fought with them in a way, not fighting really, but determined that you are going to have a girls' school, no matter what. And so they kind of thought that when I have a school, I won't succeed, and they will take over and make it into a boys' school. But now it's 7 years, and we have over 500 girls. And the first graduating class is going to be next year. And the parents and the grandparents, they are amazingly proud of these girls. So I think it's just grassroots or really working with the community is very, very important in such an area that, safety there's no safety at all. So they have to be our protectors.
So you brought men into the organization, and that has enabled its success.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Anybody want to speak to that? It echoes really what we were saying before, and Rebecca, what you were saying about he for she.
Definitely. I would say that, for example, in Bosch case, we have men in our organization. The head tailor is a male, and he's a great role model for all our scholars, as well as we try to incorporate all the boys that are in our school in our workshops, because we don't want to leave them. We don't want to leave them out. And we've had those comments like, what about us? What about, the males? So we do try to, bring them in and educate them. Why is girls' education so important? What is the big deal about it? Because they don't understand. And you don't want to create that, negative perspective. So try to educate them as well.
Right here.
In terms, just continuing with the he for she. So one of the things we did was we also run schools which are co-ed. So we got the boys, this time it's their task, to design a campaign with the community, with the boys leading, against violence against women, and then share it with the girls later and include them, but first the boys must lead it, right? One more point I wanted to make was that in terms of community mobilization, when you're talking to parents and when you're talking to them about things that are very much against traditions, child marriage, for example, and even the fact that the man has the power of life and death over his family, right? And often the answer is that, and there's a tension between, are you working for the community or against them? Is it an attack on them? I think some of these things need to be attacked. And the way we do it is we talk about, yes, okay, so this is our culture and these are the cultural rules. But you know what? You belong now, you're a citizen of a country that has a constitution, that has laws, and what do you know? They define you differently. These are some rules that now define you, and they might be against traditional rules, but they override traditional rules. And let's discuss them, which is better. There's a reason why those rules and those laws came into being. So can we discuss them? Can we work on them? And so helping them redefine certain traditional mores, and by bringing them into the purview of a constitutional existence. Now, I was wondering that, the hyenas
that you talked about. So are there laws against it, and do you approach it from a constitutional perspective? What do you do?
We have a gender equality law that criminates such kind of practices. When such kind of harmful practices, it's against the law in the country. But you know what? Because culturally it's acceptable, even though the laws are there, even though the policies are there, but they're not being implemented on the ground. But we can use them. The other challenge we have is that even the people in the judicial system, they are also gender objects. So if they are not oriented on gender issues, the importance of implementing these laws, nothing happens. I remember when we went into one of the districts, we had the prevention of domestic violence law in our country. But the judiciary in that district were not handling these cases properly. We had to, bring them together and do reorientation on issues of gender so that they should, implement these laws that we have on the ground. So it's a process that even those of us that call ourselves educated, we are gender beings, and we are also suffering from the same issues. It's not a rural issue. It's the issue of everybody. And secondly, we do a lot of bringing the men to redefine masculinity. Because our girls' initiation institution is alongside boys' initiation institution. So here they define what masculinity is. If we just deal with this side and leave this side as we haven't done anything. So it's indeed very important to engage the men to redefine masculinity.
And how do you do that? Is that through talking about it? What works?
We target the custodians, first of all. So in this case, it will be the male initiation counselors. We bring them together. And this is a secret society. So the first task we have is to make them talk. And it takes a lot of energy.
And are you in the room? Are you as a woman?
If you are not initiated, you can't be in that room. So the facilitator that facilitates this dialogue has to be somebody that knows the language. And they know it when you don't know. Because we have our own clues. We ask you a question. If you can't answer it, we know we are not initiated. We chase you out. So you have to be somebody that knows the secret society for you to be able to work with them, to break the ice, then to start to talk about the issues, and then to see how best redefine masculinity.
I think we have time for probably two more quick questions. One right here.
I want to say two very quick questions, but I also just want to make a very important comment in terms of girls within an environment like Madalo is speaking about, for example, in Malawi. And I want to say it's not, I think, unique to Malawi. There are various contexts where those challenges are faced. And I think we need to think quite critically about girls within that context. Because one of the most important things that every girl wants, that we all want as human beings, is to belong. We want to be seen to be part of a community. How do we engage with that negative cultural practice in such a way that girls are not alienated or ostracized because they want to be able to continue to be celebrated within that community? And the second thing around defining success. What is it that community sees as the success? Because if an initiated girl is seen to be more valuable and a celebrity, that's what will happen. My question particularly is to you, Madalo, because there was the radical Madalo girl who said to the mom, you know what, I'm not going to get initiated. That was, you declared war on the family, right? But I know, Krekom, and the work that you do now, because what you're talking now about is engaging with the powers that be, making sure that you are attacking the behaviors, not the people, and ensuring that you are harnessing the power that they've got so that they use it more powerfully. So I just wanted to be able to, for you, if you could speak to that, to how you're using, because they already have got traditional power, but you're not making enemies of them. You are helping them to change how they interact and engage and how they use that power, particularly as leaders. Thank you.
Well, I think you've answered the question. Not everything that is cultural is bad. I want to emphasize this. There are lots of positive cultural values and practices that we have. And what we do when we're working with the people is to look at both. And I think I stated this much earlier on, that they look at the positive issues and see how they can strengthen that. Then look at what is not right and see how they can modify or even eliminate, because some of them, they have to be totally eliminated. So, for example, in the central part of the country, we have a cultural group institution, what we call Gule Wankulu. It's a big dance. So what we have done is to mobilize this group to use the power that they have of pulling people. It's a crowd puller. And we use it to sensitize the people, as well as to raise funds, resources for their schools, to support their schools. So it's very, very important because, without, our cultural institutions, we can't make any headway in Malawi. So we use both positive and the negative components.
I love the phrase that you used, by the way, of making an educated girl a celebrity. That's a great way of looking at it. Rebecca?
I just wanted to make a comment because there's been a theme on the last two questions, and I think it's really important that this emphasis on sort of community mobilization and community leaders it's an incredibly important to connect them to national policy. And that is really how you're going to have big impact at scale. And that so often you can, and it was a theme talked about earlier as well, so often you can have national policy that doesn't actually do what Madalo just described. It just sort of rests, on the books, online, and people might even know it, but they don't own it or incorporate it. And I think civil society has an incredibly important role to play. And it's less, educating people about their rights is one piece. But I really think it's about, you do have folks who want to go from town to town saying, here's your rights, did you know you have rights? And that's useful, but that's really not game-changing. What's game-changing is the type of strategies that Madalo is talking about. And the more we can do to ensure that national governments, civil society coalitions are connecting the two, holding governments accountable for doing the type of sort of grassroots work and making it real in practice is really important. That so civil society can also own it, but they can also act as then turn around and make governments accountable for delivering on their promise.
We have one more question right here. Mm-hmm. There's a mic right there.
Thank you very much. I would like to say thank you to all the panelists and thank you to all the organizations which work on girls' education and international organizations, NGOs, communities, even the government in our country. All the government now in our country have a program on girls' education. In my country, Ivory Coast, we focus on the education in primary school, which is free. As soon as we said that the education is free, we have a lot of girls who go to school. And as my sister from Zimbabwe said, all the families understand now the importance of schooling the girls in our country. But don't forget the problem of access. And I would like to talk about that. We have a lot of strategy to encourage parents to send their children to school. But the main problem in our country, in Africa, is the issue, the economic and financial issue. Because how can you talk about schooling if we don't have any schools?
how can we talk about quality if we have 100 children or students in a classroom? So that means that we have to work about on sensibilization of population, but also we have to make the government and the partners also to help the program, such as we can have a lot of schools in our countries, primary schools, but also, that's very important, secondary schools. Because when you say, and she said in Liberia, and at the primary school you have a lot of children, but when you go far in secondary school, you don't have enough children because we don't have many secondary schools in our countries. And we don't have schools for girls. We know that when you have school for girls, that improve the number of girls who go far in their studies, and also they are protected, and many of them can end their studies without being pregnant, because pregnancy is a big issue also in our country. Thank you.
To your question about, your point about making sure that quality education involves some sort of insurance that there's actually going to be enough education available for the children who want it. Rebecca, did your definition of quality education earlier touch on that at all?
Very good question. I think, yes, it assumes that you would want this type of an education for every kid. This should not just be for the lucky ones who get to go to school. We should, work on strategies for bringing kids to school, or maybe we should start thinking about bringing learning to kids in different ways, different, approaches. If it's really hard to bring them to school, this would work with kids with disabilities. It would work with, marginalized communities that are very hard to reach, et cetera.
I want to ask each of our panelists one last question. We've heard so many things here today. I know I've been madly jotting them down. Sometimes we heard from Namanyana that sometimes the answer to the question is as simple as one word: money. We heard from Madalo the importance of having that power of the power of the change agent in the community. And Rebecca, you talked about how powerful it is when brothers and fathers and men stand up. And I think that's something that's threaded through our conversation, the power of that he for she factor. Madalo, I loved what you said about how it's not a sacrifice when you have heart for it. It's just a wonderful way of looking at the incredible work that all of you in this room do. And Charlene, you pointed out that communities really do know best, that when you're trying to answer a question, you cannot find the answer without looking at the community itself. So I want to just ask our panelists each one quick final question, which is, what is the one thing that you want the audience and everybody watching on the webcast to remember about supporting girls' education? Namanyana, we were talking before about the power of an education. What to you is the power of an education for a girl?
Slow beat.
Sorry?
Slow.
So what is the power of education for a girl?
The importance of
you were talking before, for you, what the power of education is. The importance of education.
Okay. Education is a partner of knowledge received. And
oh, great. Perfect. Thank you so much. She will do much better than I am.
okay.
Now it's clear.
Yeah.
Okay. As I conclude, I'm appealing to the parents out there, never give up on girls. And and to the leaders support girls' education.
Yeah. Don't give up on girls is in and of itself a fantastic and powerful message. I think we can all get behind that. Madala, what for you is the one thing that you want this audience to take away?
Communities are very, very powerful, and they are powerfully working behind the policies and the laws. And that it's very, very important that there should not be disconnect between the two. Yeah, that's my message.
Rebecca?
Probably less for the audience in the room and more perhaps for the audience on the webcast. That I think it's really important that everybody who cares about girls' education becomes an advocate for girls' education. And to me, that means more than just tweeting about it when you hear it in the news, but staying with the issue. Just because Malala has won the Nobel Peace Prize, and Kailash, who's been a decades-long advocate of girls' education, has won the Nobel Peace Prize, does not mean this issue is solved. And it means that we need everybody's voices, when it becomes popular and not popular. And people should stick with it, share their passion about it, share their ideas about what that they can do, that they find out with their friends, their communities, their schools, their families.
Keep it going. Charlene?
So really, when you educate a girl, you not only are educating her, you're educating her brother, her sister, her mother, her father. And, eventually when this girl becomes a mother herself, then her child is more likely to be literate if she knows how to read. So it's a trickle effect, a ripple effect, really. Like, if you educate girls, you're educating their communities and eventually everyone's future.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you to the audience.